When I decided to plan a once-in-a-lifetime trip to Spain, it wasn't just for me. It was a way to thank my parents, Miriam and Joseph, for everything they'd done, not only for me, but for my sister, Clara. Clara had been through hell this past year after her messy divorce, and my parents bent over backward to help her get back on her feet. From dealing with her lawyers to cooking her meals, they did it all. I pitched in too. Groceries, errands, even giving her my old car when hers broke down. It was exhausting, but that's what family does, right? Earlier this year, as things began to settle, I wanted to do something special. I had saved for years, originally planning to use the money for a house or a solo trip, but it felt right to spend it on this, a luxurious getaway for me and my parents. I picked Spain because it had something for everyone. My mom always dreamed of visiting Barcelona's Sagrada Familia. My dad loves good food, and I craved an experience we could all share together. I planned meticulously. Flights, boutique hotels, private tours. It was perfect. It cost a fortune, but I didn't care. This wasn't just about the money. It was about creating memories with my parents after such a tough year. Little did I know those memories would turn into a nightmare. The day of the trip arrived, and I was buzzing with excitement as I pulled into my parents' driveway to pick them up. As soon as my mom stepped onto the porch, she greeted me with, "You're late." "It's 7:03, I replied, glancing at the clock. 3 minutes late. I laughed it off, but she gave me that disapproving look. My dad followed, dragging his suitcase behind him. As I reached to help, the front door opened again. Out came Clara, rolling her suitcase. My heart sank. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice already tight. "Oh, Alina," my mom said, smiling a little too brightly. "We decided Clara should come instead of you. She's had such a hard year and she needs this trip more." I froze. "Instead of me?" "Mom, I paid for everything. I planned this for us. We're so grateful, sweetheart," she said, waving me off like I was being unreasonable. "But you work so hard. You can take another trip later." Clara, who didn't even look the least bit guilty, chimed in. "Thanks for understanding, Alina. This means a lot to me." I turned to my dad, hoping he'd say something, but he just avoided my eyes and handed me his suitcase. I wanted to scream, cry, something, but I wasn't about to cause a scene. I forced a tight smile and said, "Let's get going then." My voice felt foreign, flat. The car ride to the airport was painfully awkward. Clara, oblivious as ever, chatted away like she hadn't just stolen my trip. "Oh, Mom," she gushed. "Did you see that video about the best tapas spots in Madrid? We have to go." I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. My mom chuckled and reassured Clara they'd have time for everything. My dad, sitting in silence, fiddled with his phone. I couldn't take it anymore. "So, just to be clear," I said, my voice steady but cold, "this is officially her trip now?" Clara rolled her eyes. "Don't be so dramatic, Alina. You'll get your turn eventually." Eventually. I swallowed the lump in my throat and kept my focus on the road. At the airport, I helped unload their luggage. My mom gave me a hug, her tone dripping with fake sweetness. "Thank you for understanding, sweetheart. You're so selfless." Clara smirked. "You're the best, Alina." I watched them walk into the terminal, my chest tight with anger and betrayal. This wasn't just about the trip. It was about every time I'd been the strong one, the selfless one, while Clara was coddled. All my sacrifices for my family, and this was how they repaid me. The drive home was a blur. By the time I pulled into my driveway, anger had taken over. I slammed the door, marched inside, and opened my laptop. The trip itinerary stared back at me, a cruel reminder of what I had planned and paid for. I wasn't going to let them enjoy my hard work. One by one, I canceled everything. The hotels, the tours, even their upgraded flights. They'd still get to Spain, but the luxurious trip I'd envisioned, gone. As I hit the last cancel button, a small sense of satisfaction settled over me. They didn't deserve what I'd planned, not after what they'd done. After canceling everything, I expected a storm, and it didn't take long for it to hit. I was unpacking the suitcase I'd packed for a trip I wasn't going on when my phone started buzzing like crazy. Call after call, text after text, all from my mom. The messages started mildly frantic. "Miriam. Alina, the hotel says there's no reservation. Call me immediately. Miriam. The tour company has no record of our bookings. What's going on?" I smirked. Yep, they were figuring it out. When I didn't answer, the messages turned angry. Miriam, this isn't funny, Alina. Fix this now. I ignored everything and continued unpacking. It was almost funny how fast their tone shifted from gratitude to demands. Did they think I'd just roll over and fund their trip after what they'd done? By the time I finished putting away my clothes, I couldn't stand the buzzing anymore. Against my better judgment, I picked up the next call. Alina! My mom barked, her voice sharp and panicked. What did you do? The hotel says everything is canceled, and none of the tours are booked. We're standing here like fools. I canceled them, I said flatly. There was a long pause. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. Why would you do that? She hissed. Oh, I don't know, Mom. Maybe because you decided Clara deserved my spot on this trip more than me. You're lucky I even drove you to the airport. We thought you'd understand, she said, her voice softening, like she was trying to guilt me. Clara needed this, Alina. She's been through so much. And I haven't? I snapped. I've been helping you support her all year. Groceries, errands, even my car. And the one thing I planned for myself, something I paid for, you decided I didn't deserve. No, Mom. I don't understand. Her tone shifted back to sharp. We don't do this to each other, Alina. I laughed bitterly. Funny. I was just thinking the same thing. From the background, Clara's voice chimed in. Mom, just hang up. She's being ridiculous. That was it. You wanted Clara on this trip so badly. Enjoy it with her. Don't call me again to fix your mess. I hung up before she could respond and turned off my phone. The next morning, I turned my phone back on, curious to see if they'd cooled down. Instead, I found a flood of new messages. Miriam, this is childish, Alina. You've humiliated us. Miriam, please just fix this. We're your parents. Joseph, Alina, this isn't like you. Let's talk. Clara, seriously, Alina, grow up. I rolled my eyes and put the phone down. If they thought guilt-tripping me would work, they clearly didn't know me as well as they thought. Over the next few days, the messages kept coming, shifting from anger to desperation. Miriam, the second hotel we found is awful. We can't figure out the air conditioning, and it's so loud here. How could you do this to us? Clara, thanks for ruining everything, Alina. You're so petty. I almost laughed at how quickly things fell apart without me there to clean up the mess. They were struggling, and honestly, it felt like justice. A few days later, my dad called, and for some reason, I decided to answer. Alina, he started, his tone heavy. Your mom wanted me to talk to you. Of course she did, I said dryly. She's probably still mad I didn't fix everything for her. He sighed. Look, this has gotten out of hand. Your mom's upset, Clara's furious, and the trip has been a disaster. Sounds about right, I said, not hiding my satisfaction. You're better than this, he said, trying to appeal to my sense of duty. You've always been the reasonable one, the one who keeps everything together. That hit a nerve. You're right, I said coldly. I am the one who keeps everything together, and I'm tired of it. Alina, this isn't just about the trip. We're family. We should work through this together. Family? I said, my voice rising. Is that what we're calling this? Because to me, it feels like I'm just the backup plan whenever Clara screws up. There was silence on the other end. Finally, he said, I don't know what you want me to say. I don't need you to say anything, I replied. I need you to understand that I'm done. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't important enough to be part of this trip. Now you can live with it. I hung up before he could respond and turned my phone off again. For the first time in years, I felt like I had control. No more bending over backward to keep the peace. No more sacrificing for people who didn't appreciate it. Cutting them off, even temporarily, felt like a breath of fresh air. What they didn't realize yet was that I wasn't just done with the trip. I was done with the entire dynamic. And for once, I wasn't feeling guilty about it. The silence didn't last long. My parents and Clara weren't the type to let things go, especially when they couldn't manipulate their way out of a situation. I kept my phone off most of the time, but every now and then, curiosity got the better of me. Each time I turned it on, there was a flood of texts, voicemails, and missed calls. The guilt-tripping messages were the most predictable. Miriam, Alina, this is so unlike you. We're family. We don't treat each other this way. Clara, you've ruined everything, and Mom's a wreck because of you. Fix it. I didn't reply to any of them. Why should I? They weren't sorry for what they'd done. They were sorry I wasn't bending to their will. That distinction made all the difference. A week after their failed trip, my mom finally got through to me with a phone call. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Alina," she started, her voice dripping with forced sweetness. "Sweetheart, how are you?" "I'm fine," I said flatly. "Good, good," she said quickly, cutting to the chase. "Listen, your dad and I were wondering if you could come over this weekend. The gutters need cleaning, and you're so much better at that sort of thing than we are." I almost laughed out loud. After everything, they wanted me to clean their gutters? "I can't," I said simply. There was a pause, and her tone sharpened. "Why not?" "Because it's not my responsibility," I replied. "Hire someone if you need help." "That's not fair, Alina," she said, her voice rising. "We've apologized already." "No, you haven't," I cut her off. "You've made excuses, tried to guilt me, and expected me to just move on, but you've never actually apologized. And even if you did, it wouldn't change the fact that I'm done being your backup plan." "Alina, I have to go," I said, cutting her off again and hanging up before she could argue. The final straw came a few weeks later when Clara texted me out of the blue. "Clara, hey, Alina, I need a huge favor. My rent's due and I'm short this month. Can you spot me $500? I'll pay you back ASAP." I stared at the message for a long moment, the familiar anger bubbling up. After everything, she still had the nerve to ask for money, as if nothing had happened. I typed out a quick reply. "No." Her response came almost immediately. "Clara, seriously, after everything I've been through, you can't help me out." "Wow, you're unbelievable." That was it. I was done. No more explanations, no more arguments, no more second chances. The next morning, I sat down and wrote an email to my parents. It wasn't long or overly dramatic, just a clear, direct statement of where I stood. Subject: moving forward. Hi, Mom and Dad. I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened, and I've come to a decision. I need to step back from this family dynamic for my own well-being. For years, I've been the one holding everything together, sacrificing my own needs to keep the peace, but I can't do it anymore. I need space to focus on myself and build the life I want, free from the constant pressure to fix everyone else's problems. This isn't a decision I've made lightly, but it's one I feel is necessary. I hope you'll respect my boundaries moving forward. Alina. I hit send, blocked their numbers, and felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of their expectations. In the days that followed, they tried to reach me in every way possible. Emails, social media messages, even mutual friends. My dad even sent a long, rambling email about family unity and forgiveness, but I ignored it all. I was done playing their game, done sacrificing my happiness for people who couldn't even see me as an equal. For the first time in my life, I was putting myself first, and it felt incredible. They might not understand it now, but this was the only way I could finally break free from the cycle. And honestly, I didn't owe them any more explanations. In the weeks following my email, I settled into a peaceful routine. My phone stayed silent, my mind was clearer, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. It wasn't easy to cut ties with my parents and Clara, but I knew it was necessary. I'd spent far too long putting their needs above my own, and now I was learning to focus on myself. But of course, the silence didn't last. My parents weren't the type to let go quietly. One day I turned my phone back on to find a slew of new messages, most of them from my mom. Her tone was all over the place. Some messages were angry, others dripping with guilt, and a few even tried to sound apologetic. "Miriam, we're struggling, Alina. Your dad's car broke down, and we don't know how to cover the repairs. Can you help us out?" "Miriam, we've apologized, Alina. Why are you being so cold? This isn't like you." I didn't respond. Every message carried the same undertone. They weren't sorry for how they'd treated me. They were sorry they couldn't rely on me anymore. Then came the favors. One weekend, my mom called again. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "Hi, Alina," she said, her tone unusually cheerful. "We haven't seen you in so long. Can you come by this weekend? The house needs a good cleaning, and your dad's back has been bothering him." I couldn't help but laugh. "I'm not your maid, Mom. Hire someone if you need help." "Alina, don't be like this," she snapped, her fake cheerfulness vanishing. "We're trying to fix things. You're just being petty now." "Petty?" I repeated, my voice calm but firm. "You think standing up for myself is petty? After everything you've done, you still don't get it, do you?" There was a long pause. Then, in a voice sharp with frustration, she said, "You've changed, Alina. You used to care about this family." "No, Mom," I said, my tone cold. "I used to sacrifice everything for this family, and you took advantage of that. I'm not doing it anymore." I hung up before she could say another word. A few weeks later, Clara tried again. "Clara, Alina, I need a favor. My rent's due, and I'm short this month. Can you spot me $500? I'll pay you back ASAP." I stared at the message, feeling the familiar anger bubble up. How could she still have the nerve to ask me for help after everything? Me. "No." Her reply came instantly. "Clara, wow, really? After everything I've been through, you can't even help me out? You're unbelievable." That was the moment I realized just how deep their entitlement ran. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a resource, someone to fix their problems and make their lives easier. After that, I blocked Clara's number and felt the last thread of guilt snap. I had done more than enough for them, and I wasn't going to let them drag me back into their chaos. A few weeks later, I booked a solo trip to Spain. The idea came to me while scrolling through social media one night. Ironically, Clara had posted grainy selfies from their disaster of a trip, awkward group shots in front of the Sagrada Familia, blurry photos of paella. It was a stark reminder of what could have been. But instead of feeling bitter, I felt free. I had the money back from all the canceled bookings, and the thought of going on my own felt liberating. No schedules to accommodate, no drama to navigate, just me, doing what I wanted, when I wanted. Spain was everything I'd hoped for and more. I wandered the cobblestone streets of Barcelona, marveled at the beauty of the Alhambra, and indulged in the best tapas and wine I'd ever tasted. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. When I returned home, I felt lighter, like I'd left the weight of my family's expectations behind. My parents had texted a few times while I was gone, but I didn't reply, not yet. It took me weeks to truly process everything that had happened. Cutting ties with my family wasn't easy, and part of me still wrestled with guilt. But each day, I reminded myself of why I did it. They had taken advantage of me for years, and I'd let them. I was the strong one, the reliable one, the one who always picked up the pieces. But strength didn't mean I had to keep sacrificing myself. Now, for the first time, I was putting myself first. Eventually, my mom sent one last email. "Miriam, we're sorry, Alina. We didn't mean to hurt you. Please let us fix this." I read it twice, searching for sincerity. Maybe they meant it, or maybe they were just desperate for things to go back to the way they were. Either way, I wasn't ready to forgive them, so I didn't reply. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away, and that's exactly what I did. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving. I was finally free. Story 2, 15. When my mother, Anna, chose to bring Jason home, I was that age. Not merely for a trip, mind you. This man moved straight in. She had met him on some dubious dating website. Baggage and all. Exactly. His awful plaid suitcase, which simply screamed, "I'm going to disrupt your life," was quite accurate. He didn't appeal to me right away. He seemed to be striving too hard to be someone he wasn't, something about which seemed strange. Still, I was 15 years old. What new I had? I thought it was simply another one of Mom's flings, in one door and out the other. I could simply keep my head down, keep out of his path, and ride it out. Indeed, that did not go as planned. About 3 weeks after he moved in, I returned home from school to discover my whole life had been thrown into the garbage, basically. Gone were my skateboards, BMX bike, halfpipe I had spent weeks creating in the backyard. Disappeared. I first assumed perhaps someone had broken in and pilfers everything. Not so, though. It was Jason. He had opted to clean the garage during my school day. His garage is... Having spent 5 minutes living with us, the man was already asserting ownership of everything. He failed even to try to hide it when I challenged him. He simply sent me a haughty glance, as if he had done a favor. "Didn't want all your trash clogging my garage," he remarked. "Your mother?" She just stood there, said nothing. Simply a miserable, "Let it go, honey. It's simply stuff." Simply said. Simple enough for her to say. It had less to do with the material. It has to do with the premise. Uninvited, this man wanders into my life and begins to discard items that held great meaning for me, like I had no bearing on, like my emotions had no bearing. That was merely the start. Following the garage cleanup event, things worsened really quickly. Making my life a living nightmare appeared to delight Jason. He seemed to be testing me continuously, pushing my buttons to see out how far he could go. The worst of all is also Mom let him go. She either feigned it wasn't occurring or, worse, accused me for provoking him. He began with some ludicrous guidelines. I had to get permission to get up from the table, use the loo, walk to my room. If I hadn't asked, things suffered. I was in my room working on homework one night when he stormed in screaming about not doing my housework. It made no difference if I tried to explain I was working on a school project. He screamed about how useless and worthless I was after dragging me out of my chair by the back of my shirt and threw me against the wall. Your mother? Like nothing was occurring. She was in the living room staring TV. And then came the control. Seeing me enjoy anything infuriated him. He would find some chore for me to do if I were reading a book or engaged in video game play. I was playing a game one Saturday afternoon when he burst in bathed in perspiration after working on one of his foolish woodworking projects. Get up, he snipped. Go grass mow, now. The outside temperature was 90 degrees. Not even done the game yet. I'll finish it after supper, I said. It is too hot right now. Large error. He tossed the controller across the room after lunging at me and pulled it out of my hands. It broke against the wall. He then hauled me outside by grabbing me at the collar. He snipped, "Do it now, or you'll be sorry." Under the sweltering sun, I spent 2 hours cutting the grass. Drenched in perspiration, I returned inside and found my mom staring up from her magazine and remarked, "You know, if you just did what Jason asked the first time, this wouldn't happen." It dawned on me then. She wasn't going to be of assistance. She never was going to be on my side. I was by myself entirely. He tossed more of my belongings, including my beloved jacket, the one my grandmother had given me before she died. Random times he would storm into my room, demanding I do housework or accusing me of sloppiness. Always on edge, I was always waiting for the next explosion. I hardly rested. Every time someone spoke, I started to flinch. My marks dropped. I found it impossible to focus. Sitting in class, I would fix my gaze on the clock and hate leaving home. Though none of them inquired about it, my professors noted. Ryan, my pal, sensed something was strange. One day, "Dude, are you okay?" he inquired. "You have not been yourself lately." I passed it off with a shrug. "Just handling some stuff at home," I said. He looked at me, but he didn't press it. "Well, you know where to find me should you ever want to chat." Though I nodded, within I was wondering, what's the point? Speaking won't bring about any difference. Jason began public humiliation of me, before friends of my mother, neighbors, anyone who would listen. He would classify me as sluggish, weak, a failure. He informed a gathering of people I wouldn't be a real man since I couldn't tolerate his tough love. Everyone laughed. Nobody assumed someone would challenge him. Mom stood just next to him nodding along. I drowned, crushing, caught in a house with a mother unconcerned and a man despising me, like a ghost, invisible and helpless. I was walking shadow by the time I was 18. The anxiety, the terror, the sensation of being imprisoned had sapped me. But inside me, there was a flickering of rebellion. I was not going to let him totally break me. After graduating from high school, I hurried out of that house, looked forward instead, then looking back. Not phoned, not even made a drive through the area. I'd done. For a few years, I concentrated on creating my life, found employment, began working out, made sure I never had to rely on someone like Jason ever again. Both physically and psychologically, I grew more robust. Jason now lacked influence over me, but the past catches up in a way that is unavoidable. It arrived in a phone call from my aunt. My mother felt under the weather. 4 stages of cancer. Short-lived. I was unsure of my own feelings. She was my mother, but after all, things got tricky. I still went to visit her, though. I needed some sort of closure. The house represented a time capsule. Not anything had changed, except my mother. She was frail, weak. Jason hung over her, acting as the worried carer. It made me queasy, but he ceased to frighten me. I had grown in stature today, more robust. He used to be able to scare me, but not now. My mother drew me in aside. She was walking away from him, would not want to spend her last days with him. She was at last asserting herself after all these years. She had visited a lawyer already. Jason was on leave. She also told me she had purchased my boyhood house, the one he had been compelled to sell years prior to debt payoff. He would be relocating back there. Decent riddance. My mother died not too long afterward. I felt depressed, but there was also resentment. Furious over her not leaving earlier. Fury at Jason for pilfering my early years. Fury at myself for not acting to halt it. Then things started to get fascinating. Jason was dragging his feet, even though my mother had let him return to pick his stuff. He felt he could still saunter in and out, as though he owned the property. He had missed the date for the separation agreement, though. Legally, the house held everything that I owned. I then sold it. That all. His amazing collection of baseball cards? Gone. $4,000. His signed athletic memorabilia? 11,000 more yet. Tools for woodworking. Tools? Equipment? $6,500. Still, I kept some items. I, too, gather coins. You see his collection. Few instruments. Also, the engagement ring of his mother. 3 diamonds on a platinum band. Worth a lot, but I kept it largely since I knew it would irritate him. And lad, did it. Few weeks later I ran across him at the grocery shop. I'd sold all of his possessions. Told him straightforwardly. He shot, swung to me. Still, he was old and frail. I simply avoided his fists with ease. He was pathetic. I was taping everything with my phone out, reported the officers. He continued to whip, yell, pound his shopping cart into my car. They pulled him straight from the parking lot. Assault, threats, damage to property. The creations. He was let go from the middle school. Missed his pension. Paid for a lawyer by selling his mother's house. Ended up working as a Walmart clerk and living in a rundown trailer park. I waited in his line the first time I visited that Walmart. His wonderful reaction when he spotted me. "Hey, Jason," I said sloppily. "How are things?" He spake not a word, just looked over my goods, hands shaking. I made a point of giving him precise change. Relatively slowly, I answered, "Oh, wait," pulling out a rare coin from his collection. "Had not known I have this. I'll guess I'll substitute my credit card instead." His face became contorted with wrath. It was lovely. I returned repeatedly. I used to wait in his queue every time I needed anything from Walmart. I knew would offend him little remarks. "You know," I commented once, as he looked over a fresh pool I had purchased for my daughter, "I just sold those ratcheting wrenches you loved. Calculated I would buy this with the money. The affection of my daughter will be great. While I was out living my life, he was imprisoned there working a dead-end job. It was the best karma available. According to my niece, he created a disturbance in the middle school returning to retrieve his belongings. Screaming, weeping, embarrassing himself in front of a bunch of children. His whole life he had been striving to be the big man, the one in charge, and just now he was nothing. I saw him very seldom after that. I had what I had sought. His life was destroyed. Mine was barely getting started. Perhaps it sounds small town. But following all he subjected me to, I showed no interest. He aimed to mess my life. He stole my belongings, abused me, denigrated me, tried to send me away. He was due every ounce of suffering he experienced. Not only was it about retribution, though. It concerned closure. I thought I had control for the first time in my life. He stopped hurting me. Nothing could be taken from me by him. He really was the one losing everything, and I was the one with head held high who could leave.